Hi. When people are getting to know me and they ask enough questions to finally make me give up my big secret, which is I like to write, uh, and they ask me, well, what do you like to write about? I always have a hard time answering that question. So one time I took the time to write out what I mean by that. I always do better just reading it than trying to say it, so I'm going to read that if I could. It's a section called What is Everything? Part 1 from Eutopia book Introduction. What is everything? What questions do you ask yourself? Do you have any questions that you have tried to answer for most of your life? I've always tried to find the answer to the question, what is everything? It's hard to maintain focus on that question, though. It's easier to get diverted to other smaller questions, such as, what is the nature of a rock, or of a star, or of a starfish? These smaller questions often yield much more interesting, abundant, and more practical answers. They are attractive. They so easily attract attention away from a larger, more frustrating question, such as, what is everything? But that is the question I try to answer. As I began taking philosophy classes in school, I stumbled onto the early Ionian philosophers, usually identified as the pre-Socratic philosophers for their location on the timeline. I had to stumble onto them because beginning philosophy classes usually do not begin at the beginning of philosophy. They start somewhere else and find their way around after entering someplace in the middle. By the time I stumbled onto the Ionians, I had already read from and struggled with works from many other philosophers before finding Thales, the first of the Ionians, single pronouncement, all is water. All is water. That sounds kooky, of course. I had to read the commentaries for some insight into why he is considered to be such an important figure. They credit Thales with giving the first non-animated observation of how the world works. Animated meaning animated by soul, life. An animated observation of the world would give as an explanation for the sun's rising and setting that someone drives a chariot carrying the sun across the sky every day. In Thales' time, that was in fact the commonly accepted explanation for the daily movement of the sun across the sky. Thales proposed a single, non-animated principle that could explain all observable phenomena, that could account for all our experience in the world, the three states of water. In our ordinary experience of water, it's a liquid. When very cold, it becomes a solid. When very hot, a gas. The three states of matter, summed up, illustrated, epitomized in water. The one principle that explains, to some degree anyway, everything. Everything Thales observed was either a solid, a liquid, or a gas. Therefore, water was the key element that explained all else. Brilliant. His explanation covers a great deal of our experience with the world. Matter generally does sort itself out into one of these three states. However, most of us do not feel satisfied with an explanation of everything that addresses only the three states of matter. Ultimately, Thales failed. Over the centuries since his time, we have been failing valiantly as well, looking to find an explanation for everything. That is the history of philosophy. That is our history. We fail repeatedly but never give up. This then, Eutopia book, is my effort at a valiant failure, my attempt to explain what is everything, what is good, and how can we live.